non-narrative storytelling. I wish we had everyone here, but that's just not possible. So, but we do have three amazing filmmakers which shared their kind of work with us tonight. So I'd like to welcome down Robert Jonathan Koeyers to come down. He was the director of Here and It's Nice in Here. I'd like to welcome down Gisela Mulindwa, whose film was shown tonight. The Place I Like to Call. She's here tonight. Can she come down? And Lisa Kenney's film, which was the last film, Mum's Spaghetti. So I'm kind of keen on having audience engagement because I think we're so lucky and privileged to have filmmakers in the audience who can react to the films. So it's kind of gut instinct, how you feel. But I'm really kind of keen to hear some of the process behind the films. All of these three filmmakers are in different stages of their career, and I still see them as young, really exciting new voices, and they have completely different ways of making films. We're seeing these kind of non-narrative, we're seeing these fragmented stories, we're seeing these clear stories being carefully constructed a frame at a time. We're seeing experimental films. But at the heart of it, there are these people that live in these multicultural worlds, and there's this human conditioning that's going on. What makes people think? What do people do? Their consequences of their actions. So I'd just like to hear really briefly, I'll only talk about maybe about 3 questions, and I'm really keen to open it up. The human condition, what we do, why turn them into films? What is it you're saying? I know, Robert, Jonathan, you've spent ages looking at the human condition, and we're seeing it on the film. What are your thoughts on it? What did you learn from a year of studying the human condition? What did you learn, and what do you want the audience to think about once the film is finished?
It's a great question. The human condition. Well, yes, I think it was a very transitionary period for me, making both films. It started off as very much like a response to my own work and what I was making myself. So I was studying animation for 3 years. I was looking back at the work that I had been making, realizing that a lot of the characters that I was drawing were always white characters. The stories that I was telling were always white stories. And never really fully seeing myself reflected in the narratives that I was telling. So this also coincided with what I saw happening in the United States, specifically one shooting of a man called Philando Castile. His girlfriend was live streaming herself as he was bleeding to death in the driver's seat next to her. And in the background, you could hear the police officer yelling at himself. All of these things happened, and I felt like I wanted to respond to how I was feeling, to these things that were happening, looking at the work that I've been making, not seeing myself in that work, and then finally looking at my own human conditioning, I guess, and realizing the work that I've been making is very much about my identity, but it's never touched upon my blackness or my cultural identity. So that became my sole focus for, I guess, the next 5 years,
Thank you. Gisela, human conditioning.
I guess for me, the film that I made first was discussing the magical Negro, and that was kind of the first time I made a film about blackness, because we were doing a course on representation. I started watching these films and noticing that when it's representation, it's not real representation. They're not really having a real voice. And so I just kind of had a conversation with my sister, and we were just kind of talking about that, and I think that kind of led me to make the film that I made most recently was The Place I Like to Call, and that was more just me kind of trying to figure out my identity as a British Ugandan. Like, I can't speak the language and I can't do the dance, which is why I made a puppet do it. And so I was kind of like, it started off at that, like, with the magical Negro and figuring that out, and now it's kind of moved on to me kind of dissecting my own identity and figuring out what it means to be Ugandan and British, and growing up here and not really understanding my culture and figuring that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both fascinating because they're both feeling like there's something missing, you're not seeing it on screen, and you're having to explore yourself and then having to translate that in terms of the characters that you're making, whether you want to go there, whether you're being forced to examine yourself and identity, but they're all very strong points of views that you're having as artists and as young filmmakers. So Lisa, similar question.
Human condition.
Yeah, the cause and effect, and how what your characters are doing and how it has an impact on other people.
Yeah, so just for a bit of backstory, Mum's Spaghetti, the idea for the film came about from my own life, and it's a story about my best friend commit suicide about 10 years ago, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, another close friend of mine also commit suicide. So I came into the project thinking about kindness and the way that we speak to each other and the way that we treat each other, especially as teenagers. And in making this project and crewing up and working with different people on the project, I realised that we all had similar experiences of feeling like you want to fit in high school, and sometimes being a bit of a dick to your mates by accident, and then kind of, you know, doing all these different things and acting in different ways and trying to kind of fit into a certain mould and figuring out who you are. So, yeah, I think, I went in with this thing about, okay, I want to talk on kindness. I want to give a message that, you can be this thing, which is a cool rapper. You can be the best rapper in the world, but you can also be kind. You don't have to get to the top by punching down and by dissing everyone and taking the mick out of everybody. And I think, and I hope that that's the thing that people can relate to in the film when they watch it. Like, yeah, I've been that kid that's maybe someone said something a bit mean to me, and I felt that, kind of out of place. And then I've been able to come through the other side and realise that kindness is the way forward.
So again, you're coming from an experience that really happened to you, that had an impact on you. And then how do you as filmmakers choose the right tone, the technique to effectively communicate your ideas and or your relationship with the subject? Because yours is a deeply personal moment with serious consequences. And Gisela, yours is an experimental film that kind of celebrates culture and food and movement and dance and colour, and it's so different, your approaches, and that different. Yours is built with a team of about 10 plus people. Gisela, you seem to be working on your own, and Jonathan, you also work with a team, and you work with so much mixed media. You're using live action, you're using home footage, you're using 2D drawings, you're using even CG. I didn't see any stop motion in there.
Right.
But you're using a whole load of techniques. So how do you choose what techniques don't get in the way of your storytelling and what techniques enhance the story effectively? How do you make those decisions?
I think for It's Nice Near, it was a very long conversation. I think in the beginning we were interested in exploring the idea of adding live action to it as well. But ultimately we felt like it would distract, or it would get, people out of the film, because you're so, into this world of these characters and into their very subjective points of view. But still I was very interested in playing with different styles and mimicking who is thinking about these specific memories, and then thinking about the duality of these memories, the contrast, the juxtaposition, also in terms of feel and in terms of aspect ratios and all of these choices that we created. ultimately, we also added like some very hyper-realistic, like 3D scenes in it, which was not something that we accounted for. It was not scripted. It was not in the animatic. It was just something that I felt the film needed to think about something that feels really real. It almost looks like real life, but it's still not. There's still like this layer of artificiality to it. So ultimately thinking about the themes of the film, of like what is real, what is not, what can we believe, what can we not believe. Yeah, my other film here, it was mostly, it's a very intuitive process of like what medium fits where, and yeah, I don't know, what technique will be used to, I guess, evoke the right emotions that I'm trying to evoke.
And it's very fragmented, though, as though it's being told from a memory. Both have a similarity, and we were talking earlier on that here is a year-long research project which fueled a lot of the decisions. It's nice in here, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I originally intended to graduate with It's Nice in Here by myself in a year. And then I realized like I can't do this by myself. But I did a lot of research for it. I traveled to Los Angeles, I did like an ancestry test, and I traveled to Benin with my dad and Ghana as well. So I filmed a lot and I talked to a lot of people. And ultimately, when I came to the realization like I won't be able to work on It's Nice in Here by myself, I had to scale it down and really interrogate like what does here mean in this title, It's Nice in Here? What does it mean to be here in this body? So that's when I started writing this poem that then became, Here.
That's fantastic. And Gisela, same thing really. When you're experimenting, how do you choose what technique to use to effectively communicate your ideas? I mean, this is just as important whether you're telling a clear narrative or whether you're telling a non-narrative abstract film.
I think I kind of started with, I had a lot of like videos from visiting Uganda in like 2019, I think, and it kind of started with like the sound, and I kind of like, this is like really fast paced, and kind of made me want to work with like collage and replacement animation, and just like a lot of color and this overwhelm, and kind of my own experience being there, feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but also enjoying and kind of circulating around like all these new people and new families. So I wanted to create that, and I thought collage would be the best way. And then I also wanted to use a puppet for the dancing, and I had these like fabrics, and I just thought I'd throw them on there. And I'm like working in my shed, so it's just like whatever I have about. So that was like kind of how I got there with that. Yeah.
Have you been to Uganda?
Yeah.
So you knew what connected with it. You knew when you felt as it was right.
Yeah, exactly. And like watching those videos over again, and then like just missing it and being like, I really want to go back, and kind of trying to get that feeling back with the film.
And so, Lisa, with crafting your story, similar question, making those decisions, what's right, what's not right, when you have a whole team of people, 10 very opinionated filmmakers in different departments, and in quite an opinionated school, how do you make those decisions?
I was dead lucky. We just had a good team, and everybody was up for it, and quite on a similar page with the story. And I think a huge part of the decision making came down to like trusting the team and knowing, okay, you're the expert in production design, you're the expert in editing. Shout out Harry, we've got our editor over here, and our composer Hannah as well. Shout out Martina as well, one of our producers. But yeah, just trusting everyone, and making sure that, you know, the vision was clear, everyone knows what the story is and what the end goal is, and allowing them to bring ideas to the table, and also having the confidence to say when something's not quite right, and, you know, actually we might have to go a little bit more in this direction. But, you know, 90% of the best ideas in the film didn't come from me, they come from the team, and having worked with some wicked people. But yeah, I think I had a few things clear in my mind. I knew that I wanted it to be about kindness. I knew that I wanted it to feel very British and very northern. And yeah, I think just kind of instilling what we were going for in the team allowed everyone to have, hopefully, a bit of creative freedom and space to play, and come back with some really cool, strong ideas. And yeah, work together.
I mean, it's such a fantastically constructed film. It's hugely entertaining. It lives with you, and it's a real kind of celebration of film, and incredibly ambitious for a grad film, which is successfully done. And I think what is really hard, I think in all of your cases, which you do well, you get under the skin of your characters. You really kind of are able to really submerge yourself in the subject matter. And I still think that's quite difficult, because if you're portraying non-black characters like David, your police officer, you said you went to LA to do some research. How do you really write from the character which you don't have experience from, who's a police officer? How do you bring truth and honesty to that character?
Such a good question. So my dad used to be a police officer when I was little. This was before I was born, so I heard a lot of the stories, and I heard a lot of, like, he has this thing where he doesn't, like, sit down with his, like, back to the door and stuff like that, because he needs to have, like, a clear overview of a room. So all of these little details, these were the stories that I heard growing up. But also, I think approaching the police officer as a human being was important for me, and approaching everyone as a human being in the film, as opposed to these preconceived notions that I have of police officers. And it was difficult. I mean, when we started, I think the same month that we started working on the actual animation for David, the police officer, the George Floyd incident happened, and it was incredibly difficult to, put ourselves in the shoes of this police officer and trying to portray him as human, because I felt a lot of emotions, and the entire team felt a lot of emotions. But ultimately, the goal of the film is to show what humans act like in these moments, and not, try to push my own narrative into it too much.
No, it's. I think the character studies and the character arcs of both your narrative films are extremely strong, and when I saw It's Nice in Here, it just floored me. It's kind of effortlessly kind of the construction and the storytelling and the style, and then the content is incredibly powerful, really. So I think making people buy into your world and the way you tell the stories is really important, again, whether it's abstract or non-narrative. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the floor in a second, but what I'd like to know, because Nag and I carefully curate these films, and we're really interested in the conversation the films have with each other, I'm really curious to know one thing that you liked or learnt or were surprised about from the other films tonight.
Okay.
What was the one thing that you liked from another film?
Put it on the spot. Let me think. The thing about the Green Mile that you were talking about in your film was funny, because having not had that presented to me in the way of, like, okay, you're watching a film and you're listening to this conversation happening, I don't think I would have thought about it and I would have deeped it in that way. I was like, oh yeah, of course, that is so ridiculous. Like, why is he magic? And then, like, the only black person in this film has magical powers. Like, what is that serving? I thought that was really interesting in the way that, I'm watching this amazing animation and I'm, like, thinking about the conversation as well. And I just thought that both of your films were phenomenal, and I was, like, entirely gripped and hooked from the start. I don't know, it's just beautiful, amazing storytelling, incredible animation. Just, it's a masterclass in filmmaking.
Gisela, it doesn't need to be about their films. It can be someone else's film. Because there's some pretty amazing work there, right?
Your visual poem was really amazing to me, because it was just like, it was so personal, but also reaching out to other people, and I thought it was beautifully constructed, and just kind of going through that narrative with yourself and then also other humans, and it's just like, it was quite relatable, while also being very much for you, which was really nice to see. And yeah, the mum spaghetti, it was amazing. Yeah, it was really funny, but also like I know that character. Like I feel like I know that girl. I've met that girl. That girl has dissed me. Like, and I was like, it was cool to see and to get that arc. And yeah, I thought it was really well done, and the dog was really sweet.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, same. I feel like incredibly relatable. I think the authenticity, I think, in the choices that you make, in, for instance, like this magical Negro question. I've also had this conversation with people, and it felt very much, as I was looking at this film, like a conversation I've had with my sister, and you I don't know, you tell it so beautifully, and you also illustrate it so beautifully. It's very simple, but so effective, I think. And you also embracing like your cultural identity and these choices that you make there, I feel like is amazing. It's really beautiful. And for Mom Spaghetti, it's like, I'm amazed by how entertaining you made it, but also so heartfelt. And again, the authenticity there, it feels like real people, it feels like a real place. Like it is, yeah, beautiful choices that you've made all around.
Okay, I'm going to start a little fan club here. Okay, we've got 10 minutes, and let's open up to the floor. Questions? Yes. Is there a microphone? Thank you.
Really love the films. They are really incredible pieces. I had a question about your processes and how structured you feel your approaches are. I think, to me, kind of Mum Spaghetti feels like a very structured film, as did It's Nice in Here. But then you spoke about adding the CG kind of elements after the planning, and then your conversation piece, Gisela, felt very organic. So kind of how structured would you guys consider your process?
Gisela.
Not at all. I kind of how the films come out. It's just quite abstract, and I like to experiment. And it just started off like I walked into my sister's room and I was like, "Can we talk about this?" And she did, and then I kind of was able to construct it from that. I think I'll kind of like hear something or see something, and I'll just get inspired by that and start creating. So like it's kind of like starting off with something small and just like, I don't know, it just kind of comes to me and I make it. Planning isn't much of a thing for me. Yeah.
I think you're all playing it down. That process is really important. You've got an idea, you have a conversation, and if you feel these impulses, just do it. You don't need teams of 10 people, and dare I say, you haven't got to go to film school or art college. I think if you've got an idea and you want to try, I mean, all of these three filmmakers have approached learning their craft through just kind of doing it, really. Okay, Lisa went to the NFTS, and, you know, but before that, you were making films more or less in your bedroom, really. And Jonathan, likewise, he had to teach himself, you know, through Photoshop to make films. And then, yes, he went on to other universities. And Gisela's making these really interesting non-narrative films. She's supported by FLAMIN at Film London and Maggie and Nathan, because we can see how interesting your process is. So, yeah, it's playful, and I think you're underplaying it, but I think you're doing some really, really interesting work. So, Robert, your process.
So I have a background in live action filmmaking. So I've edited a lot of films, and as I was working on It's Nice in Here for like, I don't know, like the second year, I think, of us working on it, I realized how rigid I thought the process of animation was. You know, like you're going through the steps, and then you have this animatic, and then you're sticking to it very carefully. at one point I realized like the film needs more. So then that's when we added these, what we call pillow shots. It's like the shot of the butterfly against the window. It's a shot of road lines or lines on a road. It's a shot of like houses and birds flying by. And we added those, and I gave all of the animators like the opportunity to just like present an idea to me, make it really quickly, and that's how we then sort of like had footage to edit with, and that's how I made it even more fragmented than it already was. And that's an approach that I really love having, of having that intuitive approach that still allowed me to play around afterwards.
Couple of words on your process, very quickly.
Super meticulously planned, yeah. Like stop motion's expensive, so we had to know what we were going in to shoot, you know, in order to be the most time efficient. But we did as best as we could edit as we went along, and if we felt like we were missing a shot or if something came up in the moment, I tried to, you know, have an attitude of saying yes as much as I could if something was going to be right. So some stuff we did kind of off the cuff on a whim, added a few hours to my day in the shooting space, shooting another shot that we thought would look cool, and I think, you know, it was for the best because we got some stuff that wasn't necessarily planned but ended up being good stuff.
Thank you. There's a question right at the back. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi. Yeah, thank you so much for all of your stories tonight. They were amazing, like really inspiring stuff. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so it's kind of an expansion on Gisela's like observation about how black characters are often portrayed in movies. A while ago I saw a statistic talking about the like relative portrayal of like women on screen compared to like mythical creatures, you know, like werewolves, vampires, ghosts, etc. And it was I can't remember exactly what the statistic was, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Like the comparison, it's something like 20 times more mythical creatures in major roles, you know, over women in major roles. Bearing in mind that women represent like more than half of the population. I haven't seen statistics for race, but I mean, I'm sure it's, you know, I can only imagine that for black people and black women in particular are like grossly, you know, underrepresented compared to mythical creatures. I just wanted to ask, I don't think that the problem was with the audience. So I'm not sure if the mic, is the mic working? Yeah. I don't think the problem's with the audience. I think like the audience has a huge appetite for new stories, diverse stories, like a huge thirst to hear new things and see real people represented. I just wondered where you guys think the problem comes from. Is it like a lack of access to filmmaking? Do you think it's like a problem with the production teams? Like, are people just lazy and they make the same stories again and again? Like, what do you think? Where do you think the problem comes from with the lack of diversity and representation on screen?
Well, as you're answering that, I'd like to also know what are the solutions as well.
Right. Easy. It's a really good question. I don't know. Do you guys have an answer or a solution?
I think the problems are all the ones that you listed. I think people are lazy and want to keep making the film that they think was successful, and they're like, let's make the same Disney film again, and let's make the same Marvel film again, and they're not giving that like big budget to new filmmakers who are of any different, like just diverse filmmakers, and it feels like they do assume that the audiences don't want it, even though every time there is like something like the new Spider-Man, everyone's watching it and it does well. So it's not the fact that there's a black character, like nobody wants to watch it. So I do think it is just an assumption and just wanting to churn out the same thing because they know it's going to make money. I don't know what the solution is, I guess. We just have to keep making things, and I think things will change. I think in my film, me and my sister are we were a bit low and we were a bit like, oh, nothing's going to change, it's always going to stay the same. But like, I think things are changing. It's just a slow process, and hopefully people are going to notice. And yeah.
Lisa?
Yeah, the irony is not wasted on me that I am the only white filmmaker sitting here in this screening with, you know, amazing black filmmakers and amazing black stories being told. And I think if Mum's Spaghetti was a story about race, I wouldn't be the person sitting here. But for me going into this film and you know, having a lead character that isn't white was a massive conversation. It was definitely nerve-wracking, but for me it was about, this isn't a story about race. This is a story about a teenage girl. This is about growing up. This is about what it means to be a teenager, what it means to fit in with, you know, friendship groups and all these different things. And those are things that I feel that I can speak on. So then when it came to crafting this character of Poppy, it was more a question of, why should she be white? Like, why should white be the default? Not everybody is white. Not everybody that I grew up with and my mates that I grew up with were white. You know, everyone's different. I grew up with mixed race friends, black friends, and so it became a conversation about that. And that is not to say that, you know, Poppy's race wasn't considered in the filmmaking process. Like, it was an ongoing conversation with the production designer. Like, okay, what's a house going to look like? You know, how is it going to bleed into the different areas of this filmmaking process? And I had quite extensive conversations with friends at home that grew up where I grew up that aren't white also. So it was very much considered. But yeah, it was like, you know, why is Poppy mixed race? Well, you know, why not? Why should she be white? And yeah, like I say, it was super nerve-wracking for me to do that. But my producer is a mixed race woman as well, so she was really encouraging and supportive in making that decision. And I think being able to do that and, like, you know, have the conversation and talk about it with different people on the team and with the producer was a real eye-opener for me. And I think, yeah, it's been a great experience to have been able to do that. And I think just being kind of brave enough to have the conversation, at least hopefully, is a starting point.
That's a great question. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I want to get a couple of questions in. 1.5 questions. And I'm going to quickly say, the solution is about education, access. Film London's doing it, but I think it happens at schools. Everyone has to start, there's a voice, and it's not just black, white, neurodiversity, disability, transgender, different kinds of ideas. You want to see this being made, and the schools need to encourage more art as well. And so I think it starts at a really young age, and it has to be pushed through to higher education if you want to do, and outside of that, and then getting these films shown, getting these films seen, and then I think eventually, it's not just Hollywood, there are, you know, it's an art form, and I think more galleries, and it should be shown at cinemas before feature films. Short films that are just really challenging people's perception of what can be animation needs to be shown, which captures society. And I'm sorry I've kind of maybe slightly gone over, but I'm quite passionate about that. Another question from the audience?
I'll keep it brief because I feel like the clock's ticking.
Thank you.
But thank you guys. It's wicked seeing your stories. I guess when it comes to exploring black or other ethnicities through this medium, there's some things that are kind of inherent that might be quite challenging to convey in any medium. How much are you aware of that and wanting to kind of bring as broad an audience with you on that journey versus trying to speak to people that will most closely have the similar experiences as you, whether that's kind of managing two cultures or some of the challenges that come with being black or any ethnicity?
So, brief answer?
I think it really changed for me as well. Like when I made Hair, I made it very intuitively, and only afterwards I started thinking, who did I make this for? Who am I speaking to? And for me, it felt very much like I was also explaining a lot of things, and I was also like trying to have people empathize, but then I was critically thinking and examining who needs to empathize with this and who needs to like learn all of these things. So with It's Nice Near, I already had this like knowledge of like, okay, I'm speaking to black people, not saying that white people can't watch it or enjoy it, of course, but I don't have to like explain everything, right? So there's a shot of like hands passing cars, and then they talk about magnetic hands, and hopefully black people have experienced, or not hopefully they have experienced that, but hopefully they understand that feeling of that I was trying to capture, and all of these things, the importance of hair, the importance of music, all of these choices that you're making that feel, yeah, like you said, inherent, and that feel like we understand it and are on the same page about that.
Anyone else wants to expand on that?
Yeah, I guess just like I think about it in the sense that I'm making it for myself, and like I am a black person, so therefore I'm making it with blackness in mind, but I'm also not, because I'm just making it as myself. So I think in that sense, like, there just needs to be more black people and other ethnicities and or other people making films for themselves, and then other people will relate to it regardless of who you are. So that's kind of my way of going through it.
But there's an accessibility to all three of your films. You may be making it for yourself, but when you put it out there, there's a real connection with it, whether you're black or white, or, you know, there's a sense of, again, it goes back to this human conditioning and the way that we interact with each other. And there's a real celebration of culture, which we may not know, but we kind of might have a longing for. So I think you might be making it for yourselves, but when it goes out there, people do connect with the films. So unfortunately, we're kind of out of time. But before we go, I want to say thank you, NAG, for, you know, allowing these filmmakers to come and share their experiences. And thank you really for shining a spotlight on filmmakers that just have a different way of seeing the world and committing their desires and their passions and their dreams and real life to film. And it's really great to be able to share this with people. And we need more of this, you know, whatever influence we all have. And so thank you very much for coming and sharing that. But most of all, thank you all for attending on a wet Monday night and coming down and watching these programs of films. I wish I could talk longer. I've got lots of things to say about The Vandal. I mean, what an extraordinary, wonderfully kind of Lynchian, kind of bizarre film of live action and animation. You know, it's really interesting. I think these films are starting to really push what you can do using animation. So I really hope that some of this stuff will live in your memories and your dreams tonight. Okay, enjoy the rest of the festival.